Welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Dr. Trisha Gardener and Elliot Rose. So Trisha, if you could introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Trisha Gardener. I'm a peak performance strategist and the author of Positive Poker, and I cover all things psychological for poker players.
And my name's Elliot Rowe. I'm a hypnotherapist and mindset coach. I work with poker players, UFC fighters, and stockbrokers, basically helping people improve their performance wherever they're looking to do that. So Trisha, what have you got for us this week?
Well, I wanted to bring out something from a recent book. It's called The Power of Habit, came out in 2014 by a guy named Charles Duhigg, and it has to do with habits because I know many of us have, bad habits we're looking to break or good habits we're looking to maybe add to our repertoire. And Duhigg basically said, you can break down every single habit into three components. He said there's a cue, which is the trigger for an automatic behavior to start. And then there's a routine, which is the behavior itself you're doing. And then finally, there's a reward. Now, there's also, as a corollary, there's just a lot of neurological research that backs this up. So basically what happens when a cue and a behavior and a reward become neurologically intertwined, what's actually happening is you get a neural pathway developing and they link those three things together in your head. So basically neurons that fire together, wire together. So I want to just, from that information, break it down and give you the best tip that I can give you on how to break a bad habit. And that is you need to adopt a new habit because you've got all that neurological intertwining. It's hard to get rid of the bad habit just by sheer will. So the best way is to develop a new habit and get some new wiring going.
Yeah, and that really is an excellent book. I've had a number of poker players recommend it to me and I really enjoyed it. Really, really useful tip there. And definitely, if you're out there and you're looking for something to read, give that one a read. It's useful for almost anyone in poker, but just in general life as well. Excellent read. So, thank you for that one, Trisha.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, we've got Alex Carr coming on, and he runs the staking group Pocarr. And they stake 120 MTT players. And he's going to come on and he's going to talk about the importance of mindset and what staking is like for the players, for his company, and the sort of advice he has to improve your game and perhaps move up in stakes as well. So let's give Alex a call. So Alex, thanks for coming on the show. If you could just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I come from a sit-and-go, MTT, and cash game background. I played those in that order. And then I just wanted to get into coaching, but I felt that the current pay rates back in 2010 wasn't really worth coaching for that. So I wanted to get into staking. So we started Pocarr, closed after Black Friday, and then reopened in mid-2012. And now, about 3 years later, we have 120 guys. We've got some of the top coaches in the world. We've got Ape Styles, who's 31st on Pocket Fives. MJW006 is 16th. Giraffe Changer, I don't know how to say his name. 7 is 43rd. Rob Tinian won the Sunday Million twice. Assassinato. We've got a really good group coaching. And yeah, so that's, I guess, the bulk of what I do now. Now I mostly run Pocarr, manage that, and play a little bit of cash on the side.
Okay, and sort of that transition from player into predominantly managing all of these people, was that a bit of a shock to the system, then being in charge of all these different poker personalities?
No, because we started off small and wanted to grow organically. I mean, it really just started off me and 2 other guys that I was staking myself. And then it grew slowly. So we'd have 10 guys and 1 other coach, and then 20 guys and 3 coaches, and just kind of grew organically. And as we felt we needed more coaches, we'd add them.
Well, obviously, this is a show where we like to focus on the mental game. So I would love to hear you kind of comment about maybe some of the common mindset issues you see with the stable of players that you have working for you.
Sure. I actually wrote down a lot of leaks.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, so probably the most important, actually, they're all very important. The first one that comes to mind is just being on Skype, Facebook. Our guys love to watch Twitch. I think it's just got to be a serious leak to be watching someone else play while you're doing what you do for a living and where you're having to make strategic choices. The other one is too many tables, which I know Pad's touched on, and I can't agree with more, or can't agree with enough. Man, I have a whole list. You want me to go through the whole list?
Yeah, it'd be
Yes.
great, to be honest. This is the stuff we want to be sharing with the industry.
Okay, sure. So the next thing is thinking that there's a lot of money in higher stakes. So if you're one of the elite players, I think there probably is a lot of money in the higher stakes. But for most players, if you're playing the 100 rebuy or the Super Tuesday, I would actually argue that you're making just as much money, if not more, grinding a solid schedule of games. So we have some guys who are making 100K a year or more with a $25 ABI. And then you can shark scope anybody and see that a lot of the top 50 on Pocket Fives are making no more than that. And they're going through 100K swings. And a lot of our guys want to progress to that stage, which we're trying to help them in their career. So we're totally open to that. But we do try and encourage them to play high value games, which would get me to my next point, which is playing low value MTTs. And it also mixes with playing too many tables. So we have guys who obviously they're making money in a $2 turbo, but they're probably making 40 cents a game, something like that. Whereas if they register a high quality 5 rebuy, our guys are typically making $10 to $15 every single game. And the other point with that is the rake is lower. So a $5 quad has about 2.4% rake, and your typical freeze out will have about 9% rake. So they're just making a lot more money in the rebuys. And yeah, so the low stakes stuff, I think people are wasting some of their time playing 20 tables and having games that they're making 40 cents in. And not only are they not making a lot of money in those games, but it hurts what they're making in the other games. So they have bigger swings. They're stressed out because they're having to click buttons all over the place. They're not improving as fast because they can't mark as many hands, don't have time to mark hands for discussion and put them on our forum. The next point I have written down is not being open-minded. We have a lot of guys who think their results from 2010 matter. And they'll say, hey, I was the Bodog player of the year in 2000, whatever. The game is ever evolving. And I think the best players are constantly evolving, constantly working on their game. We recently cut a guy actually who was in just a little bit of makeup, but Rob had asked him to watch some videos and he said he would. And he watched one. And then about a month later, I asked him to watch some videos and just encouraged him to evolve with the game and work. And about 2 weeks later, he'd watched 0. So we let him go, and he was asking, like, he was really like, what is it? I mean, you guys can't be cutting me and losing out on this makeup because I'm not working. Really, what is it? And really, that's what it is. I mean, we cannot stress constantly working on your game enough. And as a backer, one of the scariest things for us is to potentially have someone who gets into 10K makeup and doesn't work on their game, because at that point, it's almost a lost cause. It's going to be hard to just suddenly start working on your game at 10K makeup because mentally you're just not going to be there. For most players, it's just something they either habitually do or they don't do. And then the last thing I've written down is spending energy on bad beats that could be directed elsewhere. So just putting in a boom replay of a bad beat into our chats, like, we actually restrict now. So if you do that, we'll just kick you out of the chats for a couple days. That time could be spent marking a real hand that matters and putting it on our forum, discussing in our strategy Skype group with other guys, trying to improve your game. If you are spending actual time of your life finding the hand in the replayer to then get the link and then send it to other people, hope that they watch it and give you, oh man, you're so unlucky. Like, we just don't want to work with you. I also think someone that has that mindset is just not going, like, that same player that's doing that is going to have other leaks. They're probably not marking enough hands. They're not cognizant enough of the fact that they're wasting that time and not spending enough time studying.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually something that I've had people talk about a lot regarding the difference between the players who get very frustrated and tilt over bad beats compared to the guys who get tilted over making mistakes at the table. Mm-hmm. And I definitely see, when I'm talking to higher stakes players, the vast majority of higher stakes players I talk to, it's the mistakes that haunt them. It's the mistake tilt they're coming to me for. And it's generally the guys who haven't had the same level of success who are saying, I can't cope when my aces are cracked. And the reality is they haven't won the pot there, but they have won the hand. They got their money in good. And it is just interesting to hear you saying exactly the same thing.
I can't agree with that enough. Our better players, when they get it in good, they're actually quite pleased if they lose that pot, if they get it in good. When they make a mistake, they kind of go crazy, and we've actually had to work with them in trying to get them to refocus. It's almost like meditating when your mind starts wandering, and your whole goal is just to immediately get back to refocusing.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of meditation. Let me ask you this. In that list you gave, I think there are a lot of just really wise pearls, but a lot of people, they're not going to have access to you and your coaches. So what advice would you give for our listeners who aren't involved with the staking group or coaching and that sort of thing? What advice would you give for them to progress in their game?
Sure. So I think the number one thing is to spend active time studying. Most players that I know, they watch a training video while they're playing and they count that as, hey, I'm studying. That's pretty much useless, I think. Whereas if your opponents, your friend is watching a video once a day and all he does is watch that video and take notes and watches it actively, it's almost like, I would say it's 10 times better. So if he compounds that over the course of a year and he's doing 10 times more than you over the whole year, that's just going to be a big difference. The other thing, I feel like for a lot of people, they can't afford to get a mental coach or a poker coach. So that's where joining a stable can help. But if you can afford it, we have had our guys work with both of you. Mm-hmm. But obviously you guys know that. And it's something that has helped in just countless areas. People just have different forms of tilt. I think you don't even really know what your leaks are until you actually speak with a professional. So something that comes to mind is for myself, before I began working with Elliot, was I had winner's tilt. And I had a very difficult time not trying to lock up wins. Like if I had a good 3 hours, I'd be wanting to end the day. Whereas if I was losing, I would want to play all day and I'd play a 16-hour session. So I was playing the bulk of my poker when I was probably not playing well, and then not playing much when I was playing very well.
That's just the exact opposite of what you want to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think being aware of these things, just listening to a podcast like this and jotting down different things, because I'm positive your listeners and for sure our guys have almost all of these leaks, at least some of them. Pads had talked about deleting stuff off his computer, which I thought was pretty darn smart. Deleting Facebook or whatever you have to. I know Rob Tinian, he has a timer that will allow him to not access Firefox or Google Chrome. And he can just set that, and there's no way for him to do anything unless he goes on his phone, and Pad's referenced locking his phone. So if you were to do those two things, even if you can't control yourself, you've made it so difficult for yourself that'll help you.
Yeah, there's a variety of apps available, and I can't think of any of them off the top of my head by name, but I know there's apps that you can install, on your computer that will allow you to block things for certain timeframes that you don't want to access. Another thing, if you want to go like really old school, another thing you can do is actually, like for your phone, go put it in the garage or put it in the attic, because then you have to go to get it. You could also, if you're trying to avoid, bad food, same thing, put the bad foods, far away from you. So in the garage or in the attic or something like that, and it'll kind of nip some of that in the bud.
That's a good one.
It's interesting to hear you say the idea of when prior to the session, perhaps the winner's tilt hadn't been so obvious to you. And it's something that I hear a lot when I do sessions with players, is that it's not that the things that are being said are groundbreaking, it's that people seem to hide their weaknesses from themselves. And it takes a third party sometimes to look at things through a fresh set of eyes to say, look, it's quite clear here that, as you described, if someone's got winner's tilt, you're playing very long losing sessions and very short winning sessions. Or, in other situations, things like, you're telling me that you're having conversations on Skype when you're playing. Would you want to back someone who was doing that? Or smoking drugs whilst playing? Would you back somebody who was smoking drugs whilst playing on your money? And almost unanimously, people would say, well, no, I wouldn't want my horses smoking weed. And you're like, okay, right, now take a step back from this situation. You are being backed by somebody, or even if it's your own money, you're playing on your own money, but you're saying you wouldn't want someone else playing on your money, doing all things that you're doing. And I think it's very useful for people to go through that process of really reflecting on the realities of what's going on in their game and how professional they're being, and sort of having a third party to go through that with them.
What kind of process?
Sorry to interrupt you. 2 more things came to me when you were speaking.
Awesome.
The first was that I know some of our guys at each break, so the 5-minute break, they'll actually write down how they feel their focus was in the last hour. And I think that's a great time to get a snack, kind of refocus your mind, reevaluate how the last hour went. Some people are taking a smoke break, and if that's what your opponents are doing, and instead you're kind of recalibrating, that's going to give you a pretty big edge. The second thing that came to my mind was myself and a few others, we had an accountability spreadsheet where if we didn't do certain things that we had told the group we would do, we would have to donate X dollars. And those dollars just went to cancer research. So we ended up donating a fair bit to cancer research. But I think that's just another good way to hold yourself accountable.
These are some great little psychological hacks you're giving. One thing I have had my clients do on the donating money, I make them donate it to a cause they hate. So that just ups the ante a little bit, because you don't want to give the money to a cause you hate or a cause that goes against what you believe. So that's another little twist if you want to try that out.
I think I like that more.
Yeah, political donations.
I was going to ask you, what sort of process do you go through to decide, how you're going to bring somebody into the staking group?
The first thing we always look at are stats. I mean, if you're a losing player at this point when we're so big, we'll give you some strong advice, which is to join a training site, watch their videos actively, and to reapply in a few months after you've played some high quality games as well. So that's the first thing. Once we see that we have a winning player, we look at a couple things. Their game selection. So we're really big on normal speeds. We'll stake someone who plays a lot of turbos, but for the most part, we think the normal speeds and the rebuys offer the biggest edge. And I spoke to the rake earlier. So now we've identified a winning player who plays high quality games, and we'll typically set up an interview where we like to see what their goals are, why they want staking, if they have any money set aside, how they're going to do in the next 3 months if things go poorly, so that we're hopefully not having to give them loans. And if the interview goes well, then we're pretty happy to work with them, and we'll give a very transparent document of what we're looking for. And what we're looking for are people who work hard, people who are open-minded, want to work with our players, our coaches, they want to improve their game. And for that reason, we're very strict. So if somebody joins us and they agree to watch 10 videos per month and post on our forum and do sessions with this coach or this mental coach, and they don't do these things, then we're very quick to part ways.
And I mean, this is something that's been mentioned by quite a few of the different staking groups, that it seems to be that the cutting of the players who refuse to do the work seems to be the difference between sort of the profitable staking groups and those who are struggling a bit more, because it's sort of the bottom 20% that seem to cause sort of an awful lot of the trouble and a lot of the stress. Is that something you guys have found?
Right. That's the Pareto Principle, the 80-20. So we're constantly, that's something we've had to work on. It was a leak of ours. It's hard to not want to keep someone who, when they're in 20K makeup, they're basically staking them at 100-0. But really, those guys who are not working hard, just their average ROI has just plummeted because their confidence is low. They're not working hard. They're playing the upper end of their ABI. They're not as open-minded to anything, coaching, to working with a mental coach. That's something we've really struggled with and we've hopefully corrected at this point. And I bring up a lot with our managers and investors, just kind of hoping to sink it into my own brain that it's something we need to be very strict with at this point. I think that's definitely something that separates the more profitable staking groups from the rest.
You mentioned confidence, and I want to ask you about that. How important is, keeping a good level of confidence to being a winning poker player?
I think confidence is good for, number one, being willing to pull the trigger on making a big call or make a big bluff. And then number two, I think it's just big for wanting to register in the first place. So I know myself personally, I have I have a plan for what I want to do for the next 6 months, and I feel like my game is going to progress so much that I actually feel really bad about myself right now. So I haven't played any W Coops for that reason. And that's a mental leak, I'm sure. But yeah, so my confidence is low and I don't even want to play. And then I really think the biggest thing is just when your confidence is low, you're probably playing more ABC. And then as tournaments progress, you're probably knitting it up even more because you're afraid to bust and afraid to pull the trigger.
And I think that's one of the things where people look at their return on investment in certain tournaments. You really need the confidence to play any tournament that you're in, still be able to play your own game. Now, I'm pretty sure there's sort of an argument that everyone that I hear said time and time again that, almost every professional player is profitable in the Sunday Million. And I actually disagree with that because there are guys who, normally they'll be playing $10 buy-ins or $15 buy-ins, that sort of level. And then once a week they play the Sunday Million. And then you think about what their mindset is going to be like when there's 4 tables left. And the chance of them playing their best game as they're very, very deep in the Sunday Million after playing for however many hours, and then suddenly the prize at the top is perhaps 10 times more than they've ever played for before. I think that actually means that a lot of these players, realistically, it's unlikely you're that profitable because you have to have a very good shot at coming first, if you're in that situation, to actually be truly profitable in the game. And what are your thoughts on that, Alex?
I 100% agree. What I try and remind our players is that at the end of the day, it's just poker and you're dealing with big blinds and you're trying to make the highest EV decision. So we had a guy recently, we had 2 guys make day 2 of the 1K W Coop. I think, Elliot, you work with both of them, actually, Marcin and Mike Oisvedo.
Oh, cool.
And
oh, yeah, I know. I've worked with Mike a time or two myself. Yeah,
he's awesome.
Yeah, he's great.
And he works very hard. So anyway, I don't know why I gave him a speech before day 2, but I typed him up something and I just basically said, hey, it's just big blinds. You're just trying to make the highest EV decision. Go get them. Don't think about the money. And I think if you're in that position, because I totally agree, if you have a $10 ABI and you're deep in the Sunday Million, I think you're going to freeze up. My biggest advice would be to just forget about the money. And I would actually try your best to almost be over aggressive if you're not sure. So if you think you should do X, but you're not sure and you're kind of tentative, then just do X. Yeah, the biggest thing is just you got to be willing to pull the trigger, make the highest EV decision, and live with the results.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, we had this very conversation I did with Jonathan Little, who's my co-author on Positive Poker. And we were talking about, the value of satelliting in to these bigger events, say like at the World Series or the WPT or something like that. And his contention was that if you're used to playing at a much lower buy-in, but then you satellite into the higher games, you're going to end up having, problems, much like what you're describing. So he was describing it in terms of the live events, and you're describing it same thing in terms of, more the online events. So I find that very, interesting, and it does make complete sense.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier that, again, probably stands out to a lot of people is this idea that potentially there's more money in not necessarily playing the highest stakes possible. And does that cause sort of big fights within the staking group? Do you have very stressed out players saying, but I want to play the highest stakes? Or are people relatively rational when you explain it to them?
Our guys are surprisingly very rational about it. We'll typically send some screenshots of the top 25 pocket fivers, and a lot of them, they just don't want to deal with a 50K downswing. The idea of having to clear 50K makeup and not make any money for 6 months, it's just kind of a lot to deal with. And at the same time, a lot of these guys, and I really think it's the majority, are going through these swings and not making that much more money than somebody playing lower to mid stakes. We are pretty flexible, where if we have a guy who works hard, he watches our videos, he attends the webinars, he's willing to request one-on-ones with our coaches, we're pretty flexible with adding games. And there are countless times that I can think of where we've moved up guys that haven't had the best results, but they're doing okay, but working really hard. And then we've either rejected moving up someone else or cut them when they're just simply not doing anything at all.
So it sounds like if somebody's really willing to get in there and put in the hard work and have the right attitude, they can go really far with your group.
Yeah, Michael Acevedo, who we were just talking about, he started in late 2014 with us. He was playing $13.75 freeze outs. I looked it up right before this interview. And he's the person we were just talking about being deep in the 1K for us. So, I mean, that's a pretty big, in less than a year, he's done that. And that's all a credit to him. He works just extremely hard. And then Rob Tinian, who coaches for us and has won the Sunday Million twice in the last year, he started at $11 freeze outs for us.
And, I have interviewed Rob a couple times and talked to him and stuff. And he just has such an amazing energy and just that go-getter type attitude. And, he just wants to keep his mind right and his game great. And I think that's wonderful.
Rob's incredibly positive, and the biggest thing for him is that he wants to know why. So if you say we should do this LOL standard, why are we doing this? And if someone can't explain, then I don't believe you. So when he does something that others will think is bad, he'll then make a Krev file and say, okay, here's my Krev file. Show me what adjustments you would make to villains' ranges, and if any, and let's see if this becomes a negative. And for the most part, he's usually making plus EV plays and can back it up with sound mathematical reasoning.
And a couple of Sunday Million wins in a year.
That'll help the confidence.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt anything from that side. Any other sort of final tips that you have for listeners out there, perhaps on the mental game of MTTs?
Really, it starts with you playing high quality games. If you're 20 tabling and playing turbos, you're just going to have a lot of variance and you're going to be frustrated. My best advice would be to play 6 to 8 tables, play high quality normal speeds. Every break, take stock of how you're doing, how you're playing, where your mental game's at, what adjustments you need to make. Have a bunch of water around. Don't drink soda. Don't have sweets. Don't drink energy drinks like me. Treat it like a professional. If you're a professional, then be a professional. If you're going to treat it like an amateur, you're probably going to have amateur results.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you there, Alex.
Yeah, that is the best, little kernel I think we've ever had on the show.
And if people are interested in getting in touch with Pocarr, they want to join your staking group, where can they find out information about it?
They can visit our website, www.pocarr.com, pocarr.com. That's probably the best way. We also have a 2+2 thread in the marketplace.
Okay, excellent. What we'll do is we'll also put up a link to that on the webinar page here as well. So, the podcast page, not webinar page. And so people can click through and they can see your website and, hopefully access some of your coaching and things. So thanks for coming on the show. Really, really useful stuff. A lot of guys should take what you're saying very, very seriously. As I say, you're running a staking group with 120 guys, so you know what's going on in the MTT world.
Thanks for having me. It was great talking with both of you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Cheers, Alex.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
So a ton of great information from Alex there, don't you think?
Oh my God. I was just making notes actually as he was talking, and my hand's about to fall off because I just made a list of, a little bullet list of everything he was saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff, and it really does show, the amount of experience he has due to the number of players that he's working with and the things that he's seen. You can see this sort of list of this mindset weakness, this problem here. So, really good to hear from someone who quite literally must have seen it all, because there's just so much information for him to gather it from. But yeah, I just think, oh, sorry, Carr?
I was just going to say, what I was thinking? Probably the most important thing he talked about was being open-minded, because I think if you're open-minded, it can just overcome so many other things, because you're open-minded, you're willing to learn, you can kind of figure everything else out, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's the guys, and as he said, someone who said, well, I was winning prior to Black Friday, why do I need to change my game?
Mm-hmm.
You probably need to change your game. Everything's evolving. You need to stay ahead of the curve. And, that's what we're really trying to bring people here is, the technical game is the technical game. That's always changing. But there is also this curve on the mental side. To reach this level of being truly elite in poker, you need to be doing what the guys at the top are doing. And, there are people out there who don't think it's quite so important to be ahead of the mental game. But it's no coincidence that a lot of the top pros in the world, a lot of very, very successful players, winners of the W Coops and things, a lot of them are working very seriously on making sure they're focused and making sure they're being true professionals at the table.
Exactly. So I feel like if our listeners would go ahead and maybe also take a few notes on this, I think you're going to find just a lot of things you can work into your own game and your own life and just make all kinds of improvements.
So Trisha, where can people find out about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Trisha Gardener. I also am at drtrishagardner.com, and you can find my book, Positive Poker, at amazon.com.
And I'm Elliot Rowe. My website is www.pokermindcoach.com, and there's information there about my MP3s and my coaching services. I will talk to you all next week.
Bye, guys.